I used to believe my life was perfect. I had everything a man could ever want, a beautiful, loving wife, a steady career, and a home that exuded warmth and comfort. My wife, Martha, had been my anchor through the highs and lows of life. Her laugh, soft and genuine, could melt away the stress of the longest days. When we exchanged vows 10 years ago, I never doubted that I'd remain faithful to her. She was my best friend, my partner, my everything. But I learned that perfection is fragile, a thin veneer that can crack under the weight of temptation. My name is Armstrong, and I am here to tell you how I let it all slip through my fingers. It all began on a crisp Monday morning in early November. The kind of morning where the air bites your skin, but the sunlight holds just enough warmth to keep you going. I kissed Martha goodbye as she handed me a thermos of coffee and a sandwich for lunch. She smiled up at me, her green eyes shining with pride. "You've got this," she said, patting my chest. "Don't let those board members push you around." Her confidence in me was unshakable, and I carried it with me like a shield as I left for work. My job at a mid-sized tech firm had been steady for years, but recently, the company was on the verge of a big expansion. I'd been working late nights, buried in spreadsheets and pitches, preparing for a make-or-break presentation. This deal was everything, a chance to secure my position and prove to myself that I could handle the weight of responsibility. That's when Rachel entered the picture. Rachel was my secretary, a young woman in her late 20s with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of humor. She'd joined the company 6 months ago, and we'd fallen into an easy rhythm at work. She was efficient, quick-witted, and seemed to know what I needed before I even asked. There had never been anything inappropriate between us, just the kind of camaraderie that made long hours bearable. But as the pressure mounted in the weeks leading up to the business trip, our interactions began to shift. Late-night strategy sessions turned into shared jokes and stolen glances. I told myself it was harmless. After all, I was a married man, and Rachel knew that. The trip to Chicago was supposed to be straightforward. 2 days, 3 meetings, and a final pitch to a group of potential investors. Rachel would handle logistics while I focused on delivering the presentation of my career. The morning of our departure, I kissed Martha goodbye as usual, but something felt different. Her embrace lingered, and she rested her head on my chest for a moment longer than usual. "Call me when you land," she said softly. "I will," I promised. The flight to Chicago was uneventful, but I couldn't ignore the way Rachel's presence seemed to fill the space beside me. She was dressed sharply in a navy blazer and skirt, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She leaned over to show me a revised itinerary on her tablet, and for a moment, her perfume, something light and floral, caught me off guard. "You okay, Armstrong?" she asked, her blue eyes studying me with concern. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. The truth was, I felt a pull I couldn't explain. A part of me wanted to dismiss it as stress or exhaustion, but deep down, I knew better. That evening, after a long day of meetings, Rachel suggested we grab dinner at a nearby steakhouse. "You need a break," she said, flashing a grin. "And besides, it's on the company's dime." I hesitated but eventually agreed. What harm could a simple dinner do? The restaurant was dimly lit, with leather booths and the faint hum of jazz in the background. Over glasses of red wine, we talked about everything but work. Rachel told me about her dreams of starting her own business one day, her favorite books, and the small town she'd grown up in. I found myself sharing stories I hadn't thought about in years, memories of college, childhood misadventures, and even how I'd met Martha. Talking about my wife should have grounded me, but instead, it felt like a reminder of the line I was inching closer to crossing. When Rachel laughed at one of my jokes, her hand brushed mine briefly, and I didn't pull away. After dinner, we walked back to the hotel in silence, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, curiosity, and a desire I hadn't felt in years. I told myself I would go straight to my room, call Martha, and put this madness behind me. But as we reached the elevators, Rachel turned to me. "Thanks for tonight," she said softly. I don't remember the last time I laughed that much. Her words were innocent, but the way she looked at me wasn't. I nodded, unable to find my voice. When the elevator doors opened, we stepped inside together. The ride to our floor was silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. I told myself this was my chance to walk away, to end the evening without crossing any lines. But when the doors opened again, and Rachel hesitated in the hallway, something inside me snapped. "You okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, but her eyes told a different story. "Good night, Armstrong," she said, lingering for a moment before turning toward her room. I watched her walk away, my feet rooted to the floor. Every rational part of me screamed to go to my room, to call Martha and hear her voice, but I didn't move. And then, without fully understanding why, I took a step forward. The hallway was quiet, save for the soft hum of the hotel's air conditioning. Rachel's door was halfway down, and I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. Every fiber of my being told me to turn around, to retreat to the safety of my room, but my legs betrayed me. I took another step forward. It felt as though I was watching someone else, like I'd become a stranger in my own skin. Rachel was unlocking her door when she noticed me approaching. She turned, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until she finally broke it. "Armstrong," she said, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing?" I opened my mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. I wasn't sure what I was doing, or why. All I knew was that I was standing there, my pulse racing, and the air between us crackling with unspoken tension. She tilted her head slightly, her hand still resting on the door handle. "Do you want to come in?" That simple question was my final lifeline, the point of no return. I could have said no, could have walked away and salvaged the life I'd built with Martha. But instead, I nodded. Rachel stepped aside, letting me into her room. The room was similar to mine, neutral tones, crisp white sheets, and a desk cluttered with papers and her laptop. The curtains were drawn, shielding us from the city lights outside. As the door clicked shut behind me, I felt a wave of panic. What am I doing? What am I about to ruin? Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with an intensity that made my throat dry. "You don't have to stay," she said, her voice soft but steady. But I didn't leave. Instead, I sat down beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her body. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air was thick with anticipation, every second stretching into an eternity. "It's been a long day," I said, my voice cracking. Rachel smiled faintly. "It has." And then, as if some invisible barrier between us shattered, she reached out and placed her hand on mine. Her touch was gentle, hesitant, but it sent a jolt through me. I didn't pull away. "This is wrong," I murmured, though my actions betrayed my words. "I know," she replied. "But..." She didn't finish the sentence, and she didn't have to. The unspoken truth hung between us, heavy and undeniable. I don't know who moved first, if I leaned toward her or if she leaned toward me, but the next thing I knew, her lips were on mine. The kiss was tentative at first, as if we were both testing the waters, but it quickly deepened. My hands found her waist, and hers tangled in my hair. It felt like an out-of-body experience, like I was watching myself from a distance. The part of me that loved Martha, that cherished the life we'd built together, screamed for me to stop. But the other part, the selfish, reckless part, drowned it out. The night passed in a blur of stolen moments and whispered confessions. I wish I could say that it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, but that would be a lie. In those hours, I let myself believe that I could escape the weight of my responsibilities, the pressures of my life, and the promises I'd made. When it was over, Rachel fell asleep beside me, her breathing steady and peaceful. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the enormity of what I'd done crashing down on me. What kind of man betrays the woman who loves him unconditionally? I slipped out of bed carefully, trying not to wake her. My clothes were scattered across the room, a chaotic reminder of my transgression. As I dressed, the guilt began to set in, sharp and unrelenting. I glanced at Rachel one last time before leaving, her face serene in sleep. The walk back to my room felt like a march to my own execution. Every step echoed with the weight of my guilt. When I reached my room, I sank onto the bed, burying my face in my hands. I thought of Martha, her smile, her laugh, the way she always believed in me. How could I face her after this? The next morning, Rachel and I met in the lobby as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with a polite smile, her eyes betraying none of the intimacy we'd shared the night before. "Ready for the big day?" she asked, holding out a coffee cup for me. I nodded, though my stomach churned. "Yeah. Let's do this." The meetings went smoothly, and the investors seemed impressed with our pitch. On the surface, everything was fine. But beneath the veneer of professionalism, my mind was a storm of guilt and regret. Every time Rachel caught my eye or brushed against me accidentally, I felt like a fraud. When the day finally ended, I retreated to my room, desperate to call Martha. I needed to hear her voice, to remind myself of the life I'd jeopardized. "Hey, sweetheart," she answered after the second ring. "How's it going?" Her voice was warm and familiar, a lifeline I didn't deserve. "Good," I lied. "The meetings went well. We might actually pull this off." "I'm so proud of you," she said, her tone filled with genuine affection. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow." "Me too," I said, though the words felt hollow. When we hung up, I stared at my phone, my chest tightening. I had betrayed her in the worst way possible, and she had no idea. That night, I couldn't sleep. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in around me. My mind replayed every moment with Rachel, every decision that had led me to this point. I thought of Martha and the life we'd built together, the nights spent laughing over dinner, the lazy Sundays on the couch, the promises we'd made. I had always thought of myself as a good man, someone who could be counted on. But now, I wasn't so sure. The truth was, I didn't know how to live with what I'd done. Returning to the comfort of home felt like a cruel joke. I had expected that once I stepped through the door, everything would return to normal. That the warmth of Martha's embrace would erase the stain I had left on my soul. But it didn't. I walked into our house as if it were a stranger's. The smell of dinner wafted through the hallway, roast chicken and mashed potatoes, Martha's signature comfort meal. It was supposed to make me feel grounded, but instead, it made my chest tighten. How could I look her in the eye after what I had done? How could I pretend everything was fine when inside, I was falling apart? "Martha?" I called, my voice betraying none of the turmoil roiling inside me. "I'm in the kitchen." She called back, her voice as light as ever. I set my suitcase down by the door and slowly walked into the kitchen, where Martha was humming to herself, stirring a pot on the stove. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore the faded jeans and t-shirt she always wore when she cooked. She looked up at me with that familiar smile, her eyes warm and loving. "You're home early," she said, walking over to give me a hug. I hugged her back, holding her just a little longer than usual, trying to remember what it felt like to be the man she thought I was. "I missed you," I said, the words feeling hollow as they left my mouth. She smiled, pulling back to look me in the eyes. "I missed you too. How was the trip?" I opened my mouth to speak, but for a moment, the words caught in my throat. The guilt was so overwhelming that I could barely breathe. Good. Busy. But productive, I managed, forcing a smile. Martha didn't seem to notice the tension in my voice. She always believed in the best of me, and I hated that I was betraying her trust in such a profound way. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "You should wash up. It's been a long day." I nodded absently, turning toward the stairs to head to the bathroom. As I walked up, I tried to steady my racing heart. The shower didn't feel like it would cleanse me, it couldn't. No matter how much I scrubbed, the stain of what I had done would remain. I stood under the hot water, my mind drifting back to that night with Rachel. The way Shed looked at me, the way we'd crossed a line that could never be undone. I wanted to forget it, to push it all out of my mind, but the guilt held me captive. When I finished, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. The man in the mirror seemed like a stranger, a man who had thrown away everything he cared about. His eyes were empty, hollow, and no matter how much I tried to convince myself that it was just a mistake, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had become someone else entirely. Downstairs, Martha had set the table. The soft glow of the chandelier above bathed the room in warm light, making everything look perfect, almost too perfect. I sat down at the table, the weight of the lie pressing heavily on my chest. "How's work?" she asked, filling my plate with food. "Busy," I muttered, shoveling food into my mouth without tasting it. She noticed. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Is something wrong?" "No," I lied again, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Martha studied me for a moment, and I could see the worry in her eyes. "Well, if you ever need to talk, you know I'm here for you, right?" "I know," I said, looking away before she could see the turmoil in my eyes. I couldn't look at her for too long. Every time I did, I saw Rachel's face instead of Martha's, the memory of that night haunting me. The next few days passed in a blur. I tried to go through the motions, pretending everything was normal, but inside, I was a wreck. My mind constantly returned to Chicago, to the affair that had tarnished everything I once held dear. At work, things were no better. Rachel and I exchanged nothing more than professional pleasantries, but the unspoken tension between us was unbearable. Every time our paths crossed, I couldn't help but feel like we were walking on the edge of a precipice. I couldn't look at her without remembering how easily I had betrayed everything I stood for. And then there was Martha, constantly doting on me, always asking about my day, planning our weekend together, making dinner like she always did. I should have been grateful, but all I could think about was how much I didn't deserve any of it. It was like I was wearing a mask that grew heavier with each passing day. The smile I plastered on my face became more and more strained, the fake enthusiasm in my voice a poor imitation of the man I used to be. I couldn't stand the weight of the lies, but I couldn't bring myself to confess either. What would I say? How could I look into her eyes and tell her the truth? How could I destroy everything we had built? But it didn't stop there. Rachel started texting me. At first, it was harmless, just a few work-related messages, quick updates about meetings or logistics. But then, it changed. Her texts became more personal, more flirtatious. She would send me random memes or texts that didn't make sense, just to keep the conversation going. I told myself it was harmless, that it was just her way of trying to get back to normal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. She was still pushing, still testing the boundaries. And I foolishly let her. The more we texted, the more I found myself slipping back into that dark place. I could feel the tension building between us again, the pull that I had once resisted now threatening to overtake me. But every time I responded, I felt my guilt multiply. I felt like I was digging a deeper hole for myself, one that I might never be able to climb out of. One evening, Martha and I sat on the couch after dinner, a movie playing in the background. She rested her head on my shoulder, her warmth comforting, familiar. But I couldn't focus on the movie. All I could think about was Rachel's last message, how she had hinted at something more, something beyond just work. Martha shifted slightly, glancing up at me. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, concerned. "Nothing," I replied quickly, too quickly. I forced a smile. "Just tired." She frowned, her fingers brushing against mine. "I know you better than that. You've been off for days. Is something going on at work?" I looked down at her, guilt threatening to consume me. For a moment, I wanted to tell her the truth, to come clean about everything. But the words never came. "I'm fine, really," I said, hoping she couldn't hear the tremor in my voice. She nodded, though I could see the doubt in her eyes. "Okay," she said quietly, snuggling closer to me. "But if you ever want to talk." "I know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I know." And then, as I held her in my arms, the weight of the truth pressed down on me harder than ever before. The days after that evening felt like an endless cycle of pretending. I kept up the charade with Martha, smiling when I was supposed to smile, laughing when the moment called for it, but inside, I was hollow. Each moment with her felt like a cruel reminder of everything I had destroyed, and the guilt weighed heavier with every passing minute. At work, Rachel and I maintained our professional facade, but beneath it, the tension continued to simmer. Her texts had become more frequent, each one more charged with meaning than the last. Yet, I kept telling myself that I could control it, that I could walk away before anything else happened. I didn't know how much longer I could keep the act going. It wasn't just Rachel's messages that haunted me, it was Martha's unwavering trust in me. She was always there, always offering her support, her love, never suspecting that I had betrayed her in the most fundamental way. The guilt gnawed at me, eating away at my insides. I could feel myself slipping further and further into the web of lies I had spun, but the thought of confessing terrified me. What would I say? How would I even begin to explain what I had done? I had destroyed her trust in me, broken something so sacred, and I couldn't undo it. But the weight of the lie was unbearable. It came to a head one evening, just a few days after the last time I had lied to Martha. It was a quiet night, the kind where the house felt too still, too empty, even though she was there beside me. We had just finished dinner, and she was curled up on the couch with a book while I half-heartedly watched TV. I tried to focus on the show, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the text message Rachel had sent earlier that day. The words echoed in my mind, and the guilt felt suffocating. It was as if the walls of our home were closing in around me, the air thick with my own dishonesty. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Martha," I said, my voice shaky. She looked up from her book, her brow furrowed slightly. "Yeah? I need to talk to you about something," I said, my heart pounding. Her expression softened immediately, concern flickering across her face. "Of course. What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, but I knew there was no easy way to say this. No way to make the truth easier to hear. "I've done something terrible," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. Martha put the book down and shifted closer, her hand resting on my knee. "What do you mean?" she asked gently. I could feel her warmth beside me, but I couldn't escape the coldness inside me. "I've been unfaithful," I confessed, my throat tightening with the weight of the words. Her face went pale, and she pulled back slightly, as if my words had struck her physically. I could see the shock in her eyes, the disbelief. "Armstrong," she whispered, almost as if she hadn't heard me correctly. "I'm so sorry," I said quickly, my voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. I cheated on you, Martha. With Rachel." The silence that followed was unbearable. Martha just stared at me, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as if she couldn't find the right words. I wanted to reach out, to take it all back, to fix what I had broken, but I couldn't. I had to face the consequences of my actions. I know I've ruined everything, I continued, my voice cracking. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I had to tell you. I couldn't keep lying to you anymore. Martha didn't speak for a long time. She just sat there, staring at me, as if she were trying to process what I had said. Her expression was a mixture of pain and disbelief, and I couldn't bear it. I had hurt her in a way that I could never take back. Finally, she stood up, taking a few steps away from me. I don't know what to say, Armstrong, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I don't know what to do with this. I stood up too, desperate to bridge the gap between us. Martha, please. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never thought I would do something like this. But I did, and I can't undo it. All I can do is ask for your forgiveness. She shook her head, her back turned to me as she stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. How could you? She asked, her voice barely audible. How could you betray me like that? After everything we've been through? I don't have an excuse, I said, my voice cracking. There is no reason good enough. I made a horrible mistake. And I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, Martha. You're everything to me. I know I've ruined everything, but please, just know that I never stopped loving you. She turned then, her eyes filled with tears. You don't understand, do you? She whispered. It's not just the affair. It's the lies. It's the fact that I trusted you with everything, my heart, my life. And you. Her voice broke, and she wiped at her eyes. You shattered that. I reached for her then, but she pulled back, shaking her head. Don't touch me, Armstrong. I don't know who you are anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was right. I had shattered everything. The life we'd built, the trust we'd shared, it was all gone. I'm sorry, I said again, my voice raw. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve it. But I will do whatever it takes to fix this, if you'll let me. Martha didn't respond. She just stood there, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold back the tears. I felt completely helpless. This was my fault, and I knew that there was no way to undo the damage I had done. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I need some time, Armstrong. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I need time to figure this out. I nodded, my heart breaking as I realized how much I had destroyed. I'll give you all the time you need, I said quietly. But please, don't give up on us. She didn't answer. She just turned away, walking slowly toward the stairs. I stood there, watching her go, feeling the weight of my actions press down on me. I had betrayed the woman I loved, and now I had to live with the consequences. I wasn't sure what would happen next. I didn't know if Martha would ever forgive me, or if she would ever trust me again. All I knew was that I had broken something precious, and it was up to me to figure out how to fix it, if it was even possible. But one thing was certain, I had learned the hardest lesson of my life. The truth, no matter how painful, always comes to light. And the cost of betrayal is a price you can never truly pay. Thank you for subscribing. Because of you, I can create more videos. Take care of yourself.